There's this invisible crisis happening right now on pretty much every street corner in Japan. It's not something you're going to see in the big headlines, but it affects the roads you drive on, the offices we all work in, really the very foundation of the entire country's infrastructure. So let's take a closer look at what's really going on here.
It really all starts with this one stark number, minus 30%. That is how much Japan's construction workforce has shrunk since it was at its peak. And we're not talking about a small number of people here. That's a loss of nearly 2 million workers. So what does a drop of that size actually mean for a country like Japan?
To really get our heads around this crisis, we're going to break it down into four main parts. First, we'll look at the shrinking foundation of the industry itself. Then we'll dive into its aging workforce, the squeeze from rising costs, and finally, we'll explore what on earth can be done to build a better way forward.
All right, first up, the big picture. Now, this isn't some new problem that just popped up overnight. To really grasp the challenge, we have to rewind the clock and see how the entire industry has been shrinking for the last 30 years. This one slide, this graph right here, it tells the whole story of the last 3 decades. You're looking at 3 key things: total investment, the number of companies, and the size of the workforce. And what's just so striking is how all 3 lines have been on this steady downward slide since they peaked back in the 90s. This isn't just one part of the industry having a tough time, it's the whole foundation that's eroding. Let's put some real numbers to those lines on the graph. Investment in construction, it's down 20%. The actual number of companies out there doing the work, down 21%. And like we saw, the workforce has taken the biggest punch, down a full 30%. It is a massive decline right across the board. But, the shrinking number of workers is really only half the story. Because when we zoom in and look at who's actually left in that workforce, well, we find a demographic time bomb just sitting there ticking away.
So this chart breaks down the skilled workers by their age, and the imbalance just jumps right out at you. See how heavily it's weighted to the right side of the graph? That points to one single unavoidable conclusion. The industry's experience is getting old, fast, and there just aren't enough young people coming in the door to fill their shoes. In this chart just makes the problem crystal clear. Only about 12% of the entire workforce is under 29 years old. Meanwhile, more than a third, a whopping 36%, are 55 or older. It begs a really critical question, right? How are you supposed to build the country for the future when most of your builders are about to retire? Just let this sink in for a minute. A quarter of all skilled workers are over 60, right now. That means in just a decade, a huge chunk of experience, of know-how, of institutional knowledge is just gonna vanish. It's gone. This isn't a slow leak anymore. We are looking at a cliff edge.
Now, as if all those long-term, deep-rooted problems weren't enough, the industry has recently been hammered by a brand new crisis, a massive spike in the cost of basic materials. And that's adding unbelievable pressure to companies that are already running on razor-thin margins. So this all started back in late 2021. It was like this perfect storm of factors all came together, causing raw material and energy costs to just skyrocket. And the construction industry was caught right in the middle of it. The impact has been absolutely staggering. I mean, just take concrete, the most basic building block you can think of. Its price shot up 21% in just 1 year. And cement, the key ingredient you need to make that concrete, was right behind it, jumping over 18%. And what about the recycled asphalt for our roads? Yep, that was up more than 15% too. When the cost of literally everything you need to build goes up this fast, it becomes almost impossible to operate profitably or even just to finish a project on budget. So, with a shrinking workforce, an aging skills base, and costs that are just soaring out of control, what can actually be done? Okay, let's shift gears and look at the potential solutions that are out there, designed to try and stabilize this absolutely critical industry. All right, one of the key tools is something called a slide clause. The easiest way to think about it is like an emergency price adjustment button that's built right into a construction contract. So if material prices suddenly shoot through the roof after a deal is already signed, this clause lets both sides renegotiate the price. Now, what's really important here is that it's not a one-size-fits-all solution. There are different types of these clauses for different situations. You've got one for slow, gradual cost changes over a long project, another for a sudden price spike in one specific material, and a third one for when inflation just goes crazy across the board. The goal is always the same, though. Share the risk So the contractor isn't the only one left holding the bag.
But, and this is a big but, here's the problem. This chart shows a huge gap between having a policy and actually using it. While basically all the prefectures and major cities have rules for these clauses, when you get down to the local municipal level, where so much of the actual work happens, adoption is only around 30%. So the tool exists, but for a lot of companies, it's just sitting in a toolbox that can't open. And even when those clauses do exist, there's this massive communication gap. On one side, you have clients saying, well, the contractor never asked for an increase. But on the other side, the contractors are terrified that if they do ask, they'll get blacklisted from future jobs. Or worse, they'll just get shut down and told it's impossible. It really shows you this power imbalance that a piece of paper alone just can't fix.
And all of this brings us to our final big question. Japan's infrastructure, its roads, its bridges, its buildings, is aging just as fast as the workforce that built it all in the first place. Now, fixes like the slide clause are a vital first step for financial stability, for sure. But they don't train new workers. They don't build new roads. With that demographic cliff getting closer every single day, are these measures really enough? Or does the entire industry that rebuilds the nation need to be rebuilt itself?